I never imagined I'd be in this place, reflecting on choices I should never have had to make. My marriage, on the outside, looked perfect. 23 years, 2 grown stepkids, a peaceful home, and a husband who provided everything, except himself. Somewhere between his constant business trips and my quiet evenings alone, something in me began to dry up. I stopped recognizing myself. No warmth, no spark, just habit, routine, silence. It started with innocent glances across the kitchen table. He had just moved in for a few months, my husband's grandson from his first marriage, but we barely had any real connection before that. He was polite, thoughtful, always offering to help. I admired how mature he'd become. I noticed the way his voice had deepened, how he spoke with a quiet confidence, how he saw me, and then I hated myself for noticing. One afternoon, I caught him watching me when I didn't have my makeup on. I laughed it off, brushing flour off my hands. He didn't look away. "You look nice today," he said. Simple, like it meant nothing, but it cut through me like a whisper I hadn't heard in years. My husband hadn't looked at me that way in over a decade. At first, I dismissed it. I was imagining things, projecting my loneliness. Right? But then there were more moments. Brushing past each other in the hallway, his hand grazing mine. Laughter that lingered a second too long. The way he remembered how I took my coffee, how he'd sit nearby while I gardened and ask about my day. He saw me, really saw me, and I had forgotten what that felt like. I scolded myself at night. I told myself to stop being ridiculous. He was young, my husband's grandson. This was beyond wrong, but my body disagreed. My heart pounded when I heard his footsteps in the morning. My breath caught when he called me by my first name instead of Grandma, like the others did. It was subtle, almost nothing, but to a woman who'd lived invisible for years, it was everything. One evening, I found myself staring at my reflection. No makeup, hair up, soft lines around my eyes. I wondered what he saw, what made him look at me like that, and more importantly, why I wanted him to keep looking. I was ashamed, confused, desperate to feel something, anything, that reminded me I was still alive. I told myself I was just lonely, that it would pass. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Something had started between us. A tension, a quiet spark neither of us spoke about, but both of us felt. And once that kind of fire starts, it doesn't just burn out. It waits, it grows, it watches. Just like he did. Just like I let him. He started staying up later, waiting until my husband went to bed, then casually appearing in the kitchen while I washed the last of the dishes. He'd lean against the counter, ask me how my day was, tell me funny little things about work or his friends, and I found myself laughing more than I should have. Not because he was that funny, but because it felt good to be acknowledged. Noticed. My husband barely noticed when I got a haircut, or when I changed the curtains, or when I cooked his favorite meal. But he did. The step-grandson. He noticed everything. "You look different today," he said one night, eyes steady. "Better. Lighter." I brushed it off with a nervous smile, but my heart was racing. I had spent years trying to matter to someone who had long stopped seeing me. Now someone saw me, and I didn't know how to handle it. Things changed fast after that. One night, we were watching a movie, and his hand brushed mine under the blanket. I froze. He didn't move. Neither did I. It was like this invisible line had been crossed without a word. I could feel the air shift. I told myself to pull away. I didn't. He leaned in closer when he spoke to me, sat a little nearer on the couch. His hand lingered when he passed me something. One night, I wore a robe over my nightdress and caught him staring. not in a disrespectful way, in a way that made me feel dangerous, desired, like I wasn't just a wife or a step-grandmother, but a woman with fire left in her. The guilt crept in slowly, but it was real. I avoided mirrors. I avoided being alone with him, but he didn't let it go. One morning, he brought me coffee and just stood there. "You're not crazy," he said. "I feel it too." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to admit it. That would make it real. But real didn't care whether I was ready or not. It followed me around the house. His scent on a hoodie he left on the back of the chair. The sound of his footsteps in the hallway. The way he'd pause when saying goodnight, like waiting for permission to say something else. Every interaction was charged, tense, unfinished. Then came the moment that changed everything. He confessed that he used to have a crush on me when he was younger, that he used to look forward to family dinners just to see what I was wearing, that he knew it was wrong, but he couldn't help it anymore. And God help me, I didn't stop him, I didn't scold him. I just stood there, stunned, craving the feeling his words gave me. When I finally walked away that night, I didn't sleep. I knew something irreversible had started. And the most terrifying part? I didn't want it to stop. Days passed with silence between us, but the silence wasn't empty. It was loud with everything we hadn't said, everything we'd almost done. I avoided him, buried myself in chores, tried to pretend like nothing had shifted. But I couldn't unfeel the way my body responded when he was near. The hunger, the ache, the way I caught myself watching the door, waiting for him to walk through it. He left me a note, just a few words. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I just wanted you to feel seen." I stared at it for an hour, fingers trembling. I could have ignored it, should have, but I folded it neatly and placed it in my drawer. I didn't throw it away. That night, a storm rolled in. My husband was out of town, delayed by weather. The house felt too still, too private. I poured myself a glass of wine, then another. I don't know if I wanted to drown the thoughts or give myself permission to finally stop resisting them. He found me in the kitchen, barefoot, staring out the window. Neither of us spoke. He took the glass from my hand. His fingers brushed mine. That was all it took. We kissed like we'd been waiting forever. There was no discussion, no hesitation, just the sound of breathing, the tremble of fingers, the release of something that had been caged too long. It wasn't wild or fast. It was slow, deep, desperate in a quiet way. I didn't think about labels or right or wrong. I didn't think about being older or being his grandfather's wife. In that moment, I was just a woman being touched in a way she hadn't been in years, and I let it happen, fully, willingly. Afterward, I sat wrapped in a robe, staring at nothing. He was still, watching me like I might disappear. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Regret wasn't the right word. I felt guilt, shame, but also something else, something I hadn't felt since I was young. Desired, awake. We tried to pretend it was a mistake, that we'd move on, forget it. But it didn't stop. The need kept pulling us back, at night, in corners, when no one was looking. Our secrets became routine, familiar. We spoke less and touched more. It wasn't about love, not then. It was about need, about escape. I should have ended it, I knew that. But the moments we shared made me feel more alive than the last 10 years of my marriage. That was the worst part. I didn't feel bad enough to stop. I felt human again, real. And I wasn't ready to give that up. Not yet. It couldn't stay hidden forever. The shift in my energy, my absence, even when I was in the same room, the way I smiled less around my husband, but couldn't stop smiling when I was alone. He noticed. He didn't ask directly, but I saw the suspicion in his eyes, the way he lingered before leaving for work, the way he looked at the step-grandson like he was searching for something. We had reached a place we couldn't maintain. It was no longer just quiet moments stolen in the dark. It was emotion. Wait. He told me he loved me, said he'd never felt something so intense, that he didn't care about age or titles or consequences. He wanted to leave, to take me with him, to start over. He believed it, and I think part of me wanted to believe it too. But I wasn't some teenager chasing butterflies. I had a marriage, a life built on decades of choices, and a name that didn't just belong to me. I looked at him, so sure, so full of fire, and I saw how far I'd let this go. What started as desire had morphed into a kind of reckless hope. But it wasn't sustainable, not in the real world, not where guilt lives after the passion fades. At a family dinner, my husband raised a toast, praised the step-grandson for his hard work, his maturity. Then he looked at me, said he was proud of how I kept the house warm and loving even when he was away. I felt sick, not because he was lying, but because I was. Smiling, nodding, playing the part of a faithful wife while my heart beat with the rhythm of betrayal. I told the step-grandson it had to stop, that I couldn't destroy everything for a fantasy. He was hurt, angry, accused me of using him to feel young again. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did. But I also knew he deserved someone who didn't flinch every time the phone rang. Someone who didn't carry the weight of a shared history she was too afraid to break from. I confessed to my husband, not everything, but enough, that I had been distant, that I had become emotionally attached to someone else, that I was lost, and it wasn't all his fault. He said very little, just looked at me for a long time and said,